Hi, this is Andre Marquis, and I wanted to talk today about metrics that matter. Our experimental framework for entrepreneurship that we've been teaching you all the way along here at the Intel Technology to Market Accelerator is the foundation for understanding how measurement can help you figure out whether your startup is succeeding or failing. And that's why we are acquainting you with metrics that matter. As you build your startup, if you can measure key indicators of what's going on, you can figure out whether you're doing better or you're doing worse relative to coming up with a profitable and scalable business model. And today, we're going to talk you through a framework for understanding some key metrics that you can measure as you get into business, as you scale up your company, and how to put that general framework to work. Again, to figure out whether you're succeeding or failing, do you have a viable business? Now, the biggest favor you can do yourself in this area is to go out and buy the book called Lean Analytics. There's a shot here of it, a screenshot here, but this is really a fantastic book that walks through metrics that matter for a whole bunch of different business models, everything from selling physical products to software as a service to mobile phone apps. And they have very detailed frameworks that will really save you a lot of time in terms of understanding things you can measure and how different measurements, or I should say different results, can affect your business model. So a good example is you sell an iPhone app, you're going to get some revenue every time someone installs the app, but perhaps if you want to scale and become successful, people have to do in-app purchase. And so there are a bunch of different factors you might want to measure about people's usage of your app that can help you figure out whether they're likely to do an in-app purchase. If they're not using your app, they're probably not going to do an in-app purchase. You're probably going to have loyal users who use your app a lot, and you're going to have users who hardly ever use it. And so looking at a framework can help you figure out who you should be marketing to, what kinds of customers you want to get, what customer segments are deriving more value from your product, and ultimately what customer segments are more willing to pay. So these are all questions that can be complicated to answer, but that's why having frameworks and having the work they've done in the book Lean Analytics Help You can be such a worthwhile investment. Now, remember, startups are searching for a scalable business model. Existing companies are executing on known business models. So just like startups have to search for their repeatable, scalable business model, they have to search for the metrics that matter. An existing business is going to have a much better idea of what these things are. You just have to appreciate as a startup to understand whether you're succeeding and failing and to understand how to adjust your business model in order to be successful is a process you have to search through. You're not going to know ahead of time who your most successful users are, what your best channels are, what your best pricing strategy is. All those things you have to find as you go. So just recognize that you are going through a search process. Now, Bhavik Joshi has put together a nice framework for us on some key metrics in relationship to your business model canvas. And some of these we've gone over already in the class. You hopefully should already have a good idea of your market type and market size over there on the right with customer segments. You understand something about your competition. And of course, early in your search process, are you validating hypotheses, invalidating hypotheses? Are you performing an effective search for a business model? Those are things you're going to want to understand and measure. And of course, Launchpad Central will help you. We've already talked about channels and revenue models a bit. And certainly when you use channels, there are things like channel margins, money that you have to give back to your channel partners, and those are going to decrease your revenue and therefore decrease your profit. So understanding those can be helpful. I won't walk through this whole chart, but take a look. And these are good places to start in terms of understanding some of your metrics that matter. And of course, the metrics that matter are going to depend a bit on your your business model. So let's take a look at some metrics that matter in customer segments. So one is understanding your market type. Are you in a new market? Are you in an existing market? Are we segmented market or a clone market? Because that's going to affect your time to profitability. Hopefully, if you are cloning an existing business model, you will have the shortest time to profitability. Of course, you'll have the most competition, so your revenue window is going to be, or your opportunity is going to have the shortest window. And if you're in a new business and trying to convince people to do something they've never done before, you're going to have the longest time to profitability and the biggest revenue curve. And of course, again, we're trying to focus on understanding, do you have a scalable business model and one that ultimately is going to be successful? Another thing really to understand is your market growing, shrinking, or staying the same? We almost always associate startups with growing markets and potentially with new products. And certainly growing markets are the easiest ones to go into typically because you can make the most mistakes, and if a market's growing, often it's because people are introducing new products, but of course, growing markets can often be the most competitive markets because people are in there trying to make money. And of course, if you're in a market that's shrinking, and there are certainly opportunities in markets that are shrinking because people are exiting those markets, and that can create new opportunities, that can be fine. That's typically less appealing to someone like a venture capitalist who's looking for big growth rates and the potential for companies to be in billion-dollar markets, but nonetheless, there can be opportunities in declining markets. But just make sure you understand, again, based on your market type and market size, what the kind of growth opportunity is. And one of the biggest time-saving steps is if you are in an existing or clone market, understanding and doing the competitive analysis to understand the revenue model, pricing, and profitability of the competition. That can save you a huge amount of time. How much money are they charging? How much do their products cost? These are all things you can look at and can save you a lot of time trying to figure out what metrics are going to matter for your business. Now let's look at a different box. Customer relationships. Some key metrics in this box that matter are your customer acquisition cost, your conversion rate, right? How many people who are exposed to your product actually buy, and what is your sales cycle time? Now, the interesting thing is customer acquisition cost, or CAC as we call it, and lifetime value of the customer are two very important metrics. Because essentially, those plus the sales cycle determine whether you're a profitable business or not. Do you actually have a business? Because as I say, a business is something where customers are willing to pay more for the product than it costs you to make it. And let me just show you an example of that. So just talking a little bit more about customer relationships and customer acquisition costs. Imagine you have a direct sales force. You have to hire a head of sales, have to hire 5 sales reps, pay them bonuses, pay their expenses for traveling all over the country. You do additional marketing, you hire a marketer, you hire a marketing coordinator, you go to 2 trade shows, and you're selling 200 units at $25,000 a piece. So your customer acquisition cost is $4,500, and it costs you $4,200 to make your good. That's COGS, cost of goods sold, down there in the bottom right. You have a business. Your customer acquisition cost is lower, or I should say, these are all your expenses, right? So if you're selling at $25,000 a year, your total cost of selling to a customer is the customer acquisition cost plus your cost of goods sold. Of course, if you keep selling more to the same customer, you don't have to go through that customer acquisition cost again. And so this just goes straight to that notion that your best customers are your existing customers. And a lot of that is because you don't have to spend all those sales and marketing dollars trying to get them in the door. So in this case, if they're selling for $25,000 a piece and they're cost of getting that first customer in the door and getting the product in their hands is $8,700. That looks like a reasonable business. And so you can see why metrics matter. If the customer acquisition cost was $30,000 and the sales price was $25,000, then you probably don't have a business. So that's a quick way of looking at that. Let's back up again to customer relationships and look at, so we talked about the GET metrics: customer acquisition cost, customer conversion rate by customer segment, and sales cycle time. And let me just talk a little bit about sales cycle time. One of the biggest challenges startups face is that it takes a long time, especially in a new market, for customers to make a buying decision. And this is why it's critically important for you to go out and do customer interviews and try to understand how long it is going to take for a customer to actually get cash into your hands. And you can ask a lot of good questions about this. What's the signing authority of someone? How much money can they spend without having to get approval from the higher-ups in their organization? That can actually put a ceiling on your price. How long does it take them to make buying decisions? Things they've bought recently, how long did it take when they bought something new? Have your customer tell you about that process. Did it have to go through committee meetings? What kinds of approvals? How ultimately long did it take? Because if you're a startup, the thing you don't have is cash. And if it takes your customer 18 months to make a buying decision, whether yes or no, you are probably going to run out of cash before you ever get to a yes. And that's something you need to understand. So understand your customer sales cycle, particularly in government, education, and enterprise. It can take people a long time to make a sales decision, and that can kill you as a startup. So make sure you understand that. We talked before in terms of keeping and growing customers about customer lifetime value, churn rate, and referral rate. So I won't redo those here, but just understand you're trying to build a model of profitability for your company. All right, let's talk a little bit about channels. So we already talked about some of this in the channels lecture, right? There are channel margins. Depending on which sales channel you use, direct sales, you get to keep all the margins, you don't have to give any away, but you have the expense of hiring and managing salespeople. If you're using resellers and distributors, those costs are lower, but of course they take money out for their own costs. And of course, another reason to do customer interviews with your sales partners, if you're going to use resellers and distributors, is to understand all of the other costs that are in that channel. Do you have to pay rebates? Do you have to pay promotional incentives for shelf space? You're going to have to train their sales force, especially if you are a new product. That's a cost there. And essentially, you have to market to your channel partners to get them to sell your product. So that's going to go into your marketing cost. Now, let's talk about metrics that matter relative to your own cost model. And this is why it's important to build a model for your company. You're going to want to understand how much money you have in the bank, once your monthly burn rate, and how much runway do you have? That's the kind of the startup term for it, which is if you multiply your burn rate, or I should say, take how much money you have in the bank, divide it by your burn rate per month, and that's how many months of life you have before you run out of cash. If your sales cycle is much, much, much longer than that number, then you're almost certain to go out of business. If you have 12 months cash and it takes 18 months for a customer to make a decision, you can see from your metrics that you're not even going to get to one sale before you run out of money, which is not a good business model. And in terms of your burn rate, just understand what's fixed cost, meaning if you have an office and you have to pay $1,000 a month for your office, that's a fixed cost. No matter how much you sell, you're going to have that $1,000 expense. And what's a variable cost? If you're a software as a service, if you have lots of customers, you're going to have to spend more on hosting on Amazon Web Services, but hopefully you have more revenue coming in as well. And that gets down to just your unit cost economics. Now, one thing you can do as a business is, as you look through the metrics in the diagram on the front of the page and go through the Lean Analytics book, I highly encourage you to build a dashboard. And understand what is success with customers. Now, throughout this presentation, we've talked a lot about customer acquisition cost and lifetime value of customer and things that are very related to sales. Another thing you're going to want to look at, especially when you're early and you don't have that many sales, are what we call customer and business success metrics. If people value your product, they will use it a lot. They will keep using it, and hopefully their usage of it will go up. And so even if you have to give away free trials early or low-cost trials early, some of the things you can measure to show whether customers are getting value out of your product are things like how much do they use it and how many people who start using your product keep using it. In this case, there's a dashboard that shows what people have been using the product over 2 weeks, and understanding what is that now, what is your goal, and what's the trend. Did you add a whole new set of features and suddenly people are using it more? Did you add a bunch of features and suddenly the number of people who install it has gone down and maybe there's a problem in your installation system? Keeping metrics can be tremendously valuable. Just again, think about for software products, right? How many people are downloading your app? How many people who download your app actually use it? How many people who use it keep using it? Those are all really important things to know, and they can highlight problems, right? If you run a big social marketing campaign, a lot of people download your app, no one ever actually uses it, you've got a problem, right? They're not going to pay you for something they're not using. And certainly if people use it and never use it again, yeah, you need to figure that out as well. And so keeping metrics around customer success, especially early as you're first getting your product in the customer hands, tremendously valuable. And then of course, business success metrics, hopefully tied to customer success, which is if you're doing good things for customers, they should pay you for it. And so understanding that some of those metrics are vitally important as well. And certainly when you talk about that, you can back up and talk about, revenue, right? What's your average selling price? What are your number of customers per year by customer segments? If you're trying to figure out which customer segments actually are deriving value from your product, having some of these metrics can be very important to say, this segment looks really appealing. We're getting lots of customers over in this segment. We're hardly getting any customers over in this other segment. We should probably focus on that one segment, build our success there, and then it'll be easy to go back to another segment. But often these things can really help you figure out which customer segments are winners. That's about it for metrics that matter. Again, read the book Lean Analytics. I highly encourage you to get it and read it. It's a really in-depth treatment. It's very clear and gives you a lot of concrete steps for deriving your metrics that matter. They have the notion of what is the one metric that matters? What is it that you're really trying to do at this stage in the business? And it can be very important to let your team know what your metrics are and what your one metric that matters. Is it installs? Is it how long customers are using the product? Is it the number of people paying you? Again, early on, it might just be how many people are actually using it and how long are they using, are they using it for a long time? Later on, hopefully it will be revenue. But it could be, what's the viral success of the product? You assume your product's going to be viral. Is it actually viral? Are people who use it, are they telling other people? And are those other people using it as well? And are those new people that have come on board telling other people? Do you really have a viral success story or not? And certainly, if you're going out for investors, they're going to want to see your metrics that matter. So I highly encourage you to collect metrics for yourself, understand your framework for success, because that's how you're going to be able to focus the team and build the business. But another important reason, even if you don't do it for yourself, is investors are going to want to see your metrics and understand that you understand your business. So again, back to the final point. The process of finding your metrics that matter is a search process. Get started early, start measuring, build the ability to measure into your products, and get your team on board. You'll learn a lot. Thank you.